All right, this morning we are going to read a passage of scripture that is very, very familiar to you, especially if you've been in the church at any point in time over any Christmas season. We're going to read a story that you know how special it is. But the way I want us to read it and hear it this morning is I don't want us to read it or to hear it as if we know the full story, okay? So we're gonna ask you to have a little bit of imagination with me this morning and ask that when you hear it, when you read it, that it's almost as if you're listening to it for the very first time, okay? I want us to see the ordinary nature of Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. The only way we can do that and see that it's ordinary is if we try to place ourselves there. Now, we know that Luke chapter 2, 1 through 7 is anything but ordinary. We know that the child that is born here is incarnate deity, as the hymn would say when we sing about it. We know that it is extremely special. Mary and Joseph, they know that to some degree, this child is no ordinary child. But this morning, I want us to read it as if we don't know who this child is, and we don't know what this means for the world, okay? So that's probably the last thing you expected your preacher to say this morning, but that's where we are, okay? The reason I say that is there's something that I want us to see in the ordinary nature of the story that we're about to read. So we're going to read this very ordinary story that could happen in an ordinary life, in an ordinary situation, okay? This is how we're going to read Luke chapter 2 this morning. So let's start in verse 1. We'll work through verse 7. It says, "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn." Now, again, we're going to use our best imagination to not read this knowing the full story of what this means. So here we have a very mundane situation in the sense that you have Mary and Joseph who have been told they have to travel to their ancestral home to register with the Roman government. So they have to go to the town of Bethlehem. They are not the only ones that are called to do this, right? Tens of hundreds of people, thousands of people are having to go back to their ancestral home at this period of Roman history to be able to register for the census. Now, this is also not the first and only census that's going to happen in the Roman Empire. We even have a tag there. It's like this is the first one when Quirinius was head of government at this particular time. So we know from history that there's other censuses that take place before this and after this. So in this situation, you have Mary and Joseph who are traveling to their home to register just like a ton of other people are doing. Not only that, but it is most likely that Mary is not the only pregnant woman that is traveling at this particular time. If you have thousands of people traveling back to their home, it is very likely, it is statistically almost improbable that no one else is pregnant. Right? She's probably not the only one. So there are other people in this situation. As they're traveling back, she's very uncomfortable. She's on the verge of having a child at any moment in time. And if any of you have ever been in that situation, you know how uncomfortable that is. And they're walking, riding all the way with a group of people to go to the town of Bethlehem to be registered. So again, let's think about the ordinary nature of what's going on here. Even the major hiccup that we have in the story that we're all familiar with, that is infamous within Christmas scenes. The major hiccup in the story even shows that this is an ordinary type of situation, an ordinary life. So they go to their home in Bethlehem, and when they arrive there, what historians would tell us is that most likely what they would do is when they arrived back in that home, knowing this is from Joseph's lineage, there's most likely kinfolk within that town. So that's who they would want to go and stay with while they were in the town of Bethlehem. Now, here's where pop culture and historical biblical accuracy begin to collide with one another. So the picture that we have of what the manger scene looks like actually isn't what most historians say it would have looked like. So the mantle scene that you have at your house, like I have at my house, with this stable and this cave kind of isolated away from everything, that's not actually historically accurate. Most likely when they went into the town, they went to a relative's home to stay with them, and when they found out there was no room, they would then offer up this, what we have listed here as written as an inn. It would have been a lower level of the home where they would have kept the animals. Or it would have been a house very close to the house that they were staying in which they kept the animals. That's why the manger is there. But ironically enough, we also don't have any presence of animals in this account either, right? Like we always have to bring the donkeys in and the lambs and stuff in our mangers. But again, in biblical sense, we don't even actually see those in the story. So they would have come up to this house, found out that there's no room. Now, the reason why they weren't able to stay with the family, it could be because they walked up and they're going like, we don't have anywhere for you to sleep. Ruth's family's here, and then we've got this family would be like, we just don't have room for you to be able to do this. Or it could have been because they are engaged, not married, and married, and Mary is pregnant. It could have been like, hey, this is too much of a scarlet letter. And so, Susan is already looking out the window blinds over here, and we can't have that. So you're just going to have to go down to the bottom level. And I know that's not ideal, but that's what we got. We don't know what situation is more accurate as to why, but we know that the situation that they're in, they're going, hey, we just got to make do with what we've got. And so we're going to stay in this space. We're going to stay where this manger is. Now, again, this shows us how ordinary it is, because if you have traveled with family, you know that nothing ever goes to plan as you travel with your family, right? Like, how many times have we shown up to a hotel room that sleeps 4 and I have 6 in tow? And I'm like, well, here we are. We're just going to make it work, right? Or you go to Granny's house for Christmas like you do every year. Granny's house is 1,300 square feet, and you got 75 relatives, and you're all supposed to all fit when it's 24 degrees outside, and you can't go outside. You travel with family. You're going like, nothing in life when you're with family is going to be straightforward and easy. There's always going to be a curveball thrown your way. Here, they show up, new parents, already stressing about what that means, right? They've never done this before. They're like all of us the rest of the time, panicking about everything. They show up, hey, you can't be here. And they're going like, what in the world? What are we going to do? So like, well, this isn't ideal, but this is what we've got, so we're going to make it work. So again, we want to look at this as going like, the situation that we find themselves in, as much as we know the full story, and we know it's extraordinary, they're very much walking through an ordinary life situation. Like, it is not foreign to me for me to picture a Russell going, oh, well, everything fell apart, shocker. And so this is where they find themselves going like, this is not what I had planned. Even from the people outside of the manger scene. If you think you've got this room that the manger's in, that baby Jesus is going to be laid in, but outside of that scene, nobody really else is even aware of what's going on. I mean, you're in a town with people coming in with family to be able to go apart and be a part of the census. So you have a town that has a small population is starting to boom overnight because of this. Most people are not even aware that Mary is there, much less that Mary is pregnant or that she's giving birth right then, right? And if they do, they may not even care because they've got 75 people in their house that houses 5. And so they're not even concerned about that. Even if people outside of that, the manger scene are going, there's a pregnant lady in there. They're not aware of everything that it would mean. Even the family members that are aware that Mary and Joseph are there, and they have formed their own opinions about how they got into this situation that they find themselves in all of that. They're going like, I don't know if we should be embarrassed or ashamed about that. Like, I don't really know how we're to feel about that. So we're just gonna distance ourselves as well. So even the family members are going like, it's just the unfortunate situation that they found themselves in. And so we have a situation in which, if we look at it again, not from the full perspective, but just looking as it is written, we can see that they find themselves in a very ordinary situation. And I think that is really important for us. I think it's really important because a lot of times when we think about God doing something big, unexpected, miraculous, we think it has to be a big circumstance or a massive situation that he is going to move in. It's not the ordinary life, the ordinary day in and day out of life that we expect an unexpected, massive move of God. Right? It's like when I was growing up and we would go to youth camp. It was like the Lord couldn't speak Wednesday night at youth group. He could only do that at student life camp once a summer. It was like that was the moment. That's when he was going to move. You know, the normal, ordinary stuff. No, he wasn't going to worry about that. He's going to wait till we all went to camp. And that's how we think about life. It's like we think God's going to do something miraculous, but it has to be a big circumstance. It has to be a big situation that we find ourselves in. But once again, if we look at the story the way it is, there is very much ordinary things taking place here. And it is in this ordinary setting that something extraordinary truly does take place. And so if we look at this thing, at this story, we have to ask, like, what does make this special? Now, again, we know the story, so it's a silly question to ask on a Sunday morning. We know what makes it special. But if again, looking at the plain text that we painted this morning and we've looked at, there's just a normal situation. There's no grandeur. They haven't put a baby hanger announcement on the outside of the door of the manger to let people know what gender the child is, right? Nobody's brought baby clothes yet. Like, it is very nonchalant as far as this child being born. So what makes it special? This is where Isaiah chapter 7 comes into play. So if you've got a Bible, flip back to Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah chapter 7, if you're in the book of Psalms, go to the right. If you're in the New Testament, go to the left. Isaiah chapter 7, there's this prophecy that is spoken to Isaiah. And in verse 14, it says, "Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, Emmanuel is actually a title that is given, and it comes from the root word that means God with. God with. So this is why in your notes, maybe down at the bottom, you have a little footnote down at the end of your text there where it says Emmanuel means God with us. So this prophecy that we see to come to fruition in this manger scene in Luke chapter 2, this is why this ordinary moment becomes extraordinary, is because of the baby that is there. He is God with us. It is the divine being of God wrapped in swaddling clothes. So this tells us that what makes ordinary lives meaningful is not the situation that we find ourselves in. It's not the family we're born into, but rather, or any other part of our lives, but what makes our ordinary lives meaningful is the presence of God with us. Once again, looking at this story, the things that make this story special are not the situation they find themselves in. It's not necessarily the lineage that he finds themselves in. It is not the manger itself that we lift up as kind of the sign of Christmas. No, it is the child himself. It is Emmanuel, that is God with us. That is the reason why this is special. But we can know this truth, but what happens is we allow that truth to get buried by all of the happenings of this world. So we know that it is the presence of God with us that makes life meaningful. But what we then can happen to us is that truth can get further and further back on the importance list. And it happens in ways we're not even aware of, right? You get a promotion at work, which is phenomenal. And now you're the vice president. And so you go walk around the office expecting people to call you Vice President Nathan. They're not doing that and it bothers you, but this is where you are. But now you're vice president. And there's a part of you that goes like, now I have respect on my name. Like, I have worked so hard to get here, and this is where I am, right? When people complain about the guy upstairs, they're now complaining about me. Like, you've reached this level of respect. Or you have a group of friends that you've wanted to be friends with for so long. You've been envious of their friendship, and now all of a sudden you find yourself hanging out with them, and you think, like, now I've arrived. I belong now because I have this group of friends that are around me. Or you're able to go to the store and you're able to purchase things without checking the account immediately and sweating it out when you're worried if you had enough to cover it or not. And you're thinking to yourself, this is financial security. This is what it feels like. And all of these things begin to creep in. And none of those things are bad, right? But they creep in, and all of a sudden we begin to look to those things as this is what it means to have meaning in my life. I have respect, I have belonging, I have security. Those things they're quietly creeping into our souls and communicating to us that we now have meaning because of these things. But the truth that we just looked at is the reason life has meaning is because it's the presence of God with us. So once again, reiterating this point that a meaningful life is centered around the presence of God with us in all things. This is the thing that gives life meaning. It gives meaning to everything else. Everything is determined by this truth that God is with us. And when we understand that, when we live with that truth, it changes everything that we do. To give you an imaginative example, all right? So I'm asking you guys to use your imaginations a lot today, and it's Christmas, so I don't really apologize for it. But it made me think of this, okay? I'm going to give an example from being a 90s kid, being a millennial. So if you are younger than me, this is going to sound weird, and it is weird, and I apologize for that, but we have a lot of things to apologize for as millennials. And so this is one of the weird things that we did. If you have a kid who's around the millennial age, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But in the 90s, we had these lucky rabbit's feet that you could carry on a keychain around with you. Okay? And I now know everybody's age that is around my age because you all shook your head like, yes, I remember those. I don't know what rabbits did to the millennials, but we evidently hated them. And there was a massacre of a lot of rabbits in the 90s, so we could have these little rabbit's foot that we would take with us that were our lucky rabbit's feet. Again, if you're younger than me, you'll have stuff that you look back on and be like, what? Why did we do that? This is one of those for us. And so we had these lucky rabbit's feet. But let's just take this example for a moment. And let's say that this lucky rabbit's foot actually worked. And that everything I did with this rabbit foot in my pocket then would turn in my favor. Okay? So I go to the bank and I go to draw out money. And that's not really the hard part. The hard part of drawing out money of the bank, it says, do you want a receipt? And it's the moment where you have to decide, do I want to know how broke I am? Or do I just want to pretend like I know how broke I am and just get the $20 and drive off? And so you have that moment of decision. And then in the moment, you're like, it's holidays. It's kind of tight. Let me see what the receipt is. And you punch the receipt and it pulls up not your account, but Elon Musk's account. And you're like, okay, well, we're going to take some more withdrawals. And we're going to go ahead and take all of this home, right? Because why? My lucky rabbit's foot. That's what did it for me. Or let's say for the hunters in the room, you're sitting in the deer stand and a Boone and Crockett record steps out in front of you. You're able to take that deer and now your name is in the record books. You're on all the Facebook pages that you see everybody else going, where are they killing those deer? Now you're with that deer. You are the greatest hunter your friends have ever known. You are so happy with this. You can pay to get it mounted now because you have Elon Musk's bank account. And so you're able to do that. So you have a full mount of this deer in your living room that your wife loves now. And so here you are arriving. You go to the store that is your favorite store. You walk in. Some random guest comes up to you and some random greeter comes up to you and hands you a gift card, and they're like, hey, just wanted you to know there's $10,000 on that card. You can buy anything in the store. And you're thinking, this is the greatest day of my life, right? If any of those scenarios happened to us, we found ourselves, and we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the reason that happened is because of this lucky rabbit's foot. You would not find me in any situation at any moment of time, never having that rabbit's foot not in my pocket. It would be with me at all times. If I needed to go to the restroom, I would take the rabbit's foot with me. When I slept at night, I would sleep fully clothed so that way I can make sure it's not going to fall out of my pockets. When I wake up in the morning and I get coffee, that rabbit's foot is going to be on my coffee mug with me. Everything I do is going to be around that rabbit's foot because that is what's bringing me all of this good fortune that is coming my way. You cannot find me without it. Now, if we knew for certain that rabbit's foot was doing all of that for us, then we would constantly have it with us. The same is true about this truth that the scriptures are teaching us this morning. The truth of life, according to scripture, is the thing that brings your life meaning is not a lucky rabbit's foot. What brings your life meaning is the presence of God with you in everything that you do. And when that happens, that changes everything that we do. Changes the way we speak. If you are in conversations with somebody, you can't wait to tell someone about the presence of God. Why? Because you're going, this is the only thing that matters in life. Just like if you were hanging out with your friends and you had this lucky rabbit's foot, you're going to tell them about it. You're going to go like, well, I went to the bank today because of this rabbit's foot. I'm a billionaire. The same way you're going, this truth, this understanding that God is with me at all times, this changes everything. So my conversations with you, like I need to find ways to be able to tell you about the greatness of the God that I follow, that he is with me at all times. I need to figure out a way to work that into conversations. Or when you're being a parent and you know that what is for your kids' greatest good is to be in the presence of God and for them to know that the presence of God is with them, then how does that change your conversations about what they're doing and the time that they're spending and the way that you share your heart with them in order that they can see the goodness of being in the presence of God? It changes it because none of the other stuff matters. None of the other stuff matters. Why? Because what they need to make their life meaningful is the presence of God with them in whatever they find themselves doing. Or if I will stay off of my phone and not get distracted because I know that what I need is to be in the presence of God in that moment and to be aware of his presence with me, because that is the only thing that matters. It's not everything that I feel like I'm missing out on in the moment. No, it's the presence of God in that moment that is everything that I need. But once again, that truth gets buried in all of the happenings of the world. So you came in, there's a handout in your seat, and there was a pen. I want you to grab the pen, and I want you to grab the handout. And if you are going, Nate, this is my first time here, what are we doing? We're taking it back to third grade for a second. So what I'm going to do here in a moment, there's a question about halfway down your sheet. And that question is, what is something that you believe makes your life meaningful? Now, before you answer that, let me give you a disclaimer. No Sunday school answers allowed. Okay? So that means I'm not coming around to check your answers this morning. Okay? So I need you to go. If I, truthfully, rapid response here in a moment, if I had this, my life would be meaningful. That's what I want you to write down. Don't overthink it. Okay? So go. Write down what is one thing. If I had this one thing, my life would be meaningful. Write that down. If you're looking at me, you're not writing. You got 8 seconds. All right. Pencils down. If you're still writing, you overthought it. All right. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to mark through that you just wrote. That whole sentence, I want you to mark through it. The one thing, I want you to write and just draw a line through it. And then underneath it, what I want you to write down below that is on the screens. I'll read it to you. It says, my life is meaningful because of God's presence. I want you to write that down. My life is meaningful because of God's presence. Now, I do this for a couple of reasons. One, they'll tell you, science will tell you when you write things down, it helps you commit it to memory more. But also, even in writing this sermon this week, I just had to stop and I just had to write that sentence for myself and go, my life is meaningful because in this very moment, as I'm writing the sermon, I'm in the presence of God. My life is meaningful because the moment I go step in my car and I go home to hang out with my family, it is meaningful because the presence of God is with me there and it is with me as I walk from that door to that car. My life is meaningful because of the presence of God that is with me. Church, your life is meaningful because the presence of God is with you. It's not meaningful because of what you can purchase. It's not meaningful because of what you can experience. It is not meaningful because of the titles that you have. It is meaningful because the presence of God is with you. And if God's presence is with us in our ordinary lives, that means that our ordinary lives can contain moments of extraordinary importance. We don't have to wait on these big moments, on these big situations for God to move. No, he is moving in the ordinary. Again, we know chapter 2 of Luke's gospel is extraordinary because of the child that she has. But everything up outside of that child is normal life things in which you find yourself in a situation you're going, I don't know how we got here and I don't know how we're going to get through it. It is in that ordinary situation that the Lord does something extraordinary. And if we understand that, then it becomes a lens through which we see the world, and we begin to see those extraordinary things that God has gifted us with, that God is doing in our lives in the ordinary everyday things. It's almost like this, where you would go to like a 3D movie, they give you the goofy glasses to wear, and then all of a sudden you wear them and you can see things on the screen that you couldn't see before. And so, you'll take them down and look at the screen, and you'll put them back up, and you're amazed at what you can see with them on and what you can see with them off. This is a lens through which we see our ordinary lives. Going, God's not waiting for these big moments. It is his presence here with me right now. That means in the ordinary, he can do something extraordinary. And so, for example, when you wake up in the morning, you have that morning cup of coffee. It's not just a cup of coffee, but in the silence, you're in the presence of God. How does that settle you in that moment? Or it may cause you in that moment to spill out everything that's on your heart that's already weighing you down. You just need to say it out loud. It's in that moment going, I'm in the presence of God. So what do I need to do in this moment to engage with his presence? Or you're hanging out with some friends and you hear laughter, and there's a lightness and a joy that surges throughout you, and you're going like, this is a gift of the Lord in that moment. His presence is there with you. It changes simple conversations like that, where you're going like, I'm thankful for this moment. Or maybe you're hanging out with, or you're in this normal situation that you encounter every single day, and you realize that it is not something that I bring to this situation that makes it special. It is not this situation I find myself in at this very moment that is special. Notice is because the presence of God is with me in this moment. That's why this ordinary thing has become extraordinary. This is one of my favorite practices to help cultivate this in my own life. Is something I read over this past year, and it's called the Examen prayer. It's an ancient practice that monks used to do. I never thought I would look at the life of a monk and be like, hey, that's some cool stuff I need to pick up on. But this is one of those things that I was like, man, this is so good. And the Examen prayer is when you would look back, a monk would look back on his day, and he would recount the moment he woke up to the moment he would find himself in that moment, and he would recount every good moment of that day, and he would thank God for them. Now, as I was reading, he was like, for our 21st century minds, it kind of helps to think about our lives as a movie. So it's like when I sit down in the evenings, one of my favorite things to do is I'll think back on the day, on the moment I woke up to the moment that I find myself at 6 o'clock in the evening. And he said, I will replay in my mind by day like a movie. And all of the good moments will bring me to a place where I thank God for them. And he goes, so it makes me think back to that cup of coffee and go like, Lord, it is so simple, but I am forever thankful for that rhythm of the cup of coffee in the mornings. Or it could take you to a time at lunch where you talk with somebody and you busted out in laughter, and that was a good moment, right? Or maybe you slept good and you got up and your back didn't hurt. That's a good moment that you can thank the Lord for. Or you went to lunch with a friend and you had crawfish etouffee at the parish and it was delicious. That's something that you thank the Lord for. And in those moments, what we're doing is we're thanking God for the good gifts, but also it's a reminder that it's not those good things that get the praise. It is not those good circumstances that get the praise. Who gets the praise is the giver of all good gifts. He says, these are the things that I'm giving to you. It is my presence with you in these moments that make these things good. And so again, this morning, it's a little bit more hands-on than what we would typically do. But here in a moment, I'm going to give us an opportunity to have a time of practicing the prayer of the Examen. So I'm going to say, let's pray, and then I'm going to be quiet. And then during that time, I want you to go back to Saturday morning in your mind. and I want you to replay Saturday morning until this very moment. And I want you to think about all the good things that took place. All of it, they can be as small as you want them to possibly be, or they could be big. It doesn't matter. All of the good things. And then as those things come to you in your mind, you just thank the Lord for them. And then I'm going to pray, and then we're going to have a time of worship in which we're going to sing about the goodness of God. That's the title of the song. And so if you want to continue in that posture of thinking back, there's some days where you feel like those good things are going to fly by, and others you're just thinking of them constantly, and you need to spend more time in prayer, do that. Or if you want to stand and sing, you can do that. Or if you just want to sit and listen to the song, totally okay. But just use that time as a time of further reflection on this idea that is the presence of God with us that gives us meaning to our lives.